suppose when you look at the footage, you get to a point where there are good times. So yeah.
You just keep moving forward. I don't think you dwell about what's happened. It's happening, so you just work through it and keep going.
It's one of the things you got to expect when you're in the area that we're in, and we've got beautiful farmland. When things are dry, it's beautiful land. So it's just one of the trade-offs that you have to just deal with. Prior to that, we had a 30-year drought, or 29-year drought, whatever it was. So dry times do come, and yeah, it is what it is, and you got to keep going forward. That's all we can do.
Starting to wear a bit thin.
It does a bit. I mean, a lot of us are probably, I can't speak for everyone, but I think we're just stuck in autopilot now at this point in time. It's been that many years. So we're well practiced in all this. And yeah, you do focus on the better times as well, because they will come.
Every time it does happen too, you do something different, you know, like you be a little bit more prepared for next time. It seems to be not getting easier, but you know what I mean? You just stack things differently and think about it, you know. Even the other day we were putting stuff on pallets up on pallet racking, you know, bits and pieces. You know, you think, oh, we probably won't need, you know, we don't use it that often. Let's just get it up high. So it's just another thing we don't need to move, all that sort of stuff, you know. So
sheds are a lot cleaner.
Well, yeah, sheds are cleaner, organised.
Cleanest they've ever been for the past.
We're getting more organised that way.
Our judgment is just, do we evacuate? Do we evacuate? We'll be right, and we always leave it to the last minute.
I got through it and sold a product that wasn't the best, but got through it and come out on the other side, and you know, still ticking over, making a few dollars. So you got to be pretty proud of that, and haven't you know, really lost. Obviously we've lost, but you know, haven't gone and lost the farm or lost anything. So that's gonna be pretty proud. Yeah, I think I did expect it like that, but we've never seen it on our farm with turf on it. So when we did see something like that on our farm, it was, yeah, that's definitely our place. When we did, is that? No, that's the road.
I think that's Adam's place, isn't it?
Yeah. When we did see it on our farm many years ago, it was veggies, so you know, that kind of look isn't so bad if you're growing veggies, because you can go straight in and start working again. When you see that on a turf farm, it's you got to go into recovery mode somehow.
We've always, growing up for us, we've always heard the stories that, you know, I hadn't seen a flood until those times, so you always heard about it. You always knew it happened, and same as sort of Paul, you know, it was always in the veggie days, so. You know, it was what it is, but yeah, just the first time seeing it was a eye opener, just a sickening feeling that where do you start from? But yeah, it's just would have happened, but in the veggies, yeah, it's dirt around just so.
It's not an issue. You plant it back in anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't affect.
Yeah, no, that's right. The product.
Well, you lost the product 100%,
yeah.
but you can get something going straight away. As soon as it dries out, you could work up a little bit of ground and plant something straight away.
Much quicker to bounce back. Yeah, crop turnover, the crop cycle's a lot quicker. Yeah. So yeah, as Paul was saying, like it's a bit unique. So I saw it all, silt from, you know, silt layers to just sand dunes pretty much. So we had a neighbouring paddock that was all cultivated before the first big flood, and that paddock was then thrown onto one of our fields at depths of like between 3/4 of a metre to 1.5 metres deep in places. So yeah, we ended up turning into pretty much soil removers, excavation for a while there. It's quite resilient, but it did, yeah, if it's any thicker than sort of 15 mil, that's where the damage seemed to have occurred, where it's pretty much just, you know, kill off and then replant. Which we found worked the best. When there's a bit more sand over the profile, it seems to affect it a lot more. As you get the sand, once you get sand in there, the strength of the grass underneath when you roll it up, just
you struggle.
You lose your
tensile
strength.
If you got much sand, you won't.
Yeah.
tough to cut.
Yeah, with your silt, as much as it makes the product more wet and heavy when you're harvesting it, but a bit of silt, sort of, you get a half decent product. But once you get the sand on it, that's for our instance where the sand was, it just start again with it. You're not gonna save it, sort of thing. That's from what we found.
Where did the sand come down mostly?
Riverbanks, paddocks around you.
When it's super thick, it'll kill the grass, you know, if it's really thick. But if it's just in the thatch layer, it's either persist with really heavy turf. You go back to short and rolls and bits and pieces to get them on a pallet, and like there were stages there we cutting 50 metres and it's 1.6, 1.7 tonne, you know.
I suppose it depends on the time of year too, and definitely the variety, because if there's times of year where if it was to happen now, you'd stay wet for a fair bit, and if you had a lot of silt, you know, when it dried up, you could probably use some machines that'd mill it off, like what we demonstrated, and you'd come into the growing season. And then if you're in the growing season and you milled off the cooch, your top mate cooch, and got rid of it and still got plant stock on the ground and a hard base to go forward, if that's the decision that you could make, then that's good. That's not too bad. That's not a bad result. With buffalo, it's probably a lot harder. If you go and top make buffalo, I don't think it'd be economically viable for them to do it. I don't grow it, so when I have grown it, I haven't had it in a flood, so I don't think it'd be viable to do it that way.
But be just as quick as to chop it up.
Plowed in.
You lose your tensile strength once you when you top make the silt and your grass away. You lose your tensile strength for next crop. That's what we found with it.
We pretty much pick where we can harvest, where it's still saleable, and wherever it's not saleable, hoe it in.
So make your decisions on time of year and crop variety, and yeah.
I suppose it's been too wet to know how compact everything has become, because when things are wet, the compaction doesn't worry you. I suppose we'll find out that when we go into dry times again.
Just a smaller observation was from all the excessive rain, we're just noticing we're able to actually access paddocks quicker than usual. Like in other words, like for how wet it's generally been, most of these last 3-4 years, you can generally get in quite quickly with the harvesting equipment and harvest turf. So it's quite surprising.
Or we're more tolerant.
Yeah, or maybe we're more tolerant too. Yeah, who knows? Could be a combination of things, or things are a bit more automated, so that's helping. Yeah. So, but no, definitely found that. Yeah.
I suppose in the aspect of with compaction, if they weren't getting the silt on the farm, and they weren't having to restart and plough paddocks and start again, there probably would be the massive compaction issue going on with tons and tons of water, weight of water over it. But if a lot of people here have actually turned their paddocks over in the last few years, the compaction level hasn't hit us yet. The compaction issue hasn't hit us yet. So
I think for our business, since the first flood, I don't think there's one paddock that hasn't been turned over and started again since we started getting floods there in 2020. So each paddock, we had the opportunity to re-level, reshape. So obviously you're turning over ground, you're moving ground, doing what you need to do. But even the areas that we didn't re-level, I'm pretty sure we've redone them or done a fair bit of aeration in them, just to do what we have to do.
I wouldn't say not so much a silt like that on the video there, but more so if you get the big sand dumps and depending where you're situated on the river, it changes greatly. We don't get, where we are situated on Pittown Bottoms Road, we don't get big dumps of sand or anything coming up over the bank on our paddocks. We get silt. But other guys, a couple of k's down the road, they can get, like Jonathan said, not just from that paddock being cultivated, but in certain areas where if you're on a bend in the river and stuff like that, it can put 2 foot of sand over your paddocks. So that changes the game completely.
The first 2 floods were completely different for us. For the first time, we didn't get as much sand, but then the second flood that we had in that same year, we had more riverbanks break and wash out with that, and the water coming in a different direction. We had sand pushed over the driveway differently. We had the driveways cut out differently and put into the paddock in different areas. So depending on the velocity of the water coming down, how quick it wants to come down, and the other elements that go on, it changes flood to flood. It's hard to say, that paddock's going to get this amount of, it's prone to get more sand there. It can just change. Every flood's different, so yeah, it's a hard one to say.
This cycle of floods in some areas, such as Cornwallis and that, it's changed the landscape. So the floods are doing everything different than they used to do historically.
It's a different ballgame.
Yeah, it's a different ballgame now.
And that's because of the speed of the water,
Yeah.
the absolute speed of the water. The water that's coming down, I wasn't here on the weekend on Friday when the water came down, but 1.6 metres in 1 hour rise.
Yeah.
That's massive.
Really?
That's massive.
Because there's
That's
no
scary.
local rain, no backwater holding it back. It was all coming from Camden Way.
That's scary.
So
bastard.
no local rain, you're pretty much almost kicking dust, and that happened in a previous flood as well. And that's where the damage does occur. If we have no localised rain and it's coming from further upstream, that's where all the damage will occur as water breaks in onto dry land. The velocity's not slowed down, so it'll just come crashing through. It can even damage infrastructure, a lot of riverbank damage, knock out sheds, just do all sorts of things, affect drains, wash out roads, as we saw earlier in the video.
And that affects the silt level. Depends where it cuts, is where it gets silt from to throw it in different areas.
Well, to take Cornwallis for example, Joe mentioned before, Cornwallis there from the first flood, there was a major washout there with the council equipment there with the drains, and that hasn't been repaired, and that just keeps getting bigger and bigger, taking more. But we've got a farm there in Cornwallis, and the water, when it comes down these floods, fills the back, it comes in from there and sort of fills all the lower areas of Cornwallis first. So you'll lose a lot of water. It's a big area where water can go, and our farm actually, you can see after the flood just went down on Friday, you see the water, where the water come in through the farms and in through the creek. You can see the properties that are closer to that creek level with more brown silt, and as it got to sort of where our property is a little bit higher, you see there's not as much silt has come, and that's because it sort of filled the back of the properties first and coming in a different direction than right from the river jumping over the banks. So you lose so much water, and that plays a part with Freeman's Reach and sort of Pitt Town, because a lot of water, that's closer to the dam, so a lot of water gets lost in that section where it fills up there, and it affects what happens downstream as well. So it's
At the moment, it's a safe bet that Cornwallis is going to fill up first. The Cornwallis, as bad as it sounds, takes the heat off the farms in Freeman's Reach and Pitt Town and whatnot. They're copping it a lot harder than anyone else. The only thing they've got going for them is because it's so open, it drains out probably real quick for you. But if the damage that's in Cornwallis wasn't there at the moment, farms like ours that's only had 3 floods on it since this weather event started in the last 4 years, probably would have had maybe another 2, and that's there's benefit for us, but someone's got to take the brunt of that.
And going back to what Paul was saying, how quick this last flood come down with the speed of the water. If Cornwallis is all repaired and that was how it was before we started flooding, how quick that water come down, and without that water being lost in that sort of section we're talking about, that would have put a lot more pressure on your banks, because after that you get a lot of S-bends and turns in the river, naturally does. So that will then put a lot of pressure on the riverbanks downstream, because that water isn't getting lost in that big open area. But if what happened at Cornwallis, that can happen anywhere on the river. And once it breaks, then the water just keeps eating away at it.
If this water keeps coming down the way it is, and Cornwallis is fixed, I have no doubt it's going to happen from the breakaway, in between the breakaway and somewhere towards Windsor. It's just going to carve it open.
That's
It has to.
that's what the breakaway is, isn't
That's
it?
what the breakaway is.
The breakaway was
And
what's
it
happened
is-
to Cornwallis.
Yeah, it is going to break it away. It is going to tear it open.
I'm finding now, after the floods, it takes a few harvests to get your paddocks evened out again, because you have patches that were not fit to harvest the first time, and then it's affecting the cuts down track. So it's ongoing struggles because your paddocks aren't growing even.
They're not uniform.
They're not uniform.
Or you've left old bits. And
Yeah, you left old bits.
we're going
and
through that
then-
now,
yeah.
It,
Cornwallis.
and if it's thicker and older and thatchier, it seems like it obviously holds more silt. So, you know, and then you can get the paddock looking good and you think it's all ready to go. Like you said, if there's a bit of an old bit there, you'll get to it, and then next thing you know, it's exploding, you can't harvest it. So,
We're going through that at the moment. You cut in one roll, you get
Beautiful
5
roll.
beautiful rolls, then you get 1 or 2 rolls, and just
Yeah.
there's weak, no tensile strength, and that's just because it was an old crop from last year that you had to leave because you couldn't harvest it or wasn't quite ready or
so
whatever
the
the case
flow
was.
on effects.
Yeah.
And that's where sometimes biting the bullet and ploughing the paddock back in will get you that even crop quicker.
It's just hard sometimes
Hard
to
to
think like
say.
that, you know.
That's right.
And I suppose with a younger paddock, you're more inclined to be rougher with it, be harsher on it, be it plough it in, start again, or be pretty hard and try and scrape or top make the silt or sand off it. But with a fit paddock, you're going, like, look
Yeah,
what I've
yeah.
put into it.
Yeah.
I've got
Try-
sails.
Try and get it up.
You're going to try and get it off the ground,
Yeah, yeah.
and then you end up with the troubles that these guys are talking about, which we've got the same troubles there as well.
All of a sudden you got turf that was ready, you got orders for it, and you don't really have any light than where I'm going to cut from. So it's a hard to hold in. You know, you've got 9 to 12 months before you're cutting that paddock in. So it's a very hard one to try and, I guess, work out what the best option is.
But you can have a 14 metre flood. If it comes up slow, and it's just water, if the way it's coming up isn't as fast as some of the other floods that we've had, it'll be clean water. It won't be too bad. Like some of the footage in there with the rocks and whatnot, that's another story again. But you won't get that when it comes up slow. If you can fill up your lowlands and your lagoons and that, and meet the water where it jumps the road, there's less damage. But who knows what to do? There's certain floodgates around the area, and who knows what the right thing is to do. Open those floodgates, keep those floodgates closed. It's
Yeah, we've got some vision.
It's hard to
there.
know unless you know exactly how high it's going to go. It's hard to say what the best idea is.
There's a real vision there of that the spill, and geez, it's a lot of force that comes down that river when those gates open. It's huge. Seeing it there, it's a marvel to see it every time. But geez, you guys must hate it.
What we're kind of grateful for is like the crop we grow is, it prevents erosion to some degree. So we only could just imagine how bad it would look if we grew wheat or veggies or anything that needs more cultivation to get your crops up. Yeah, it'd be quite scary, and also with the water receding too, that's where a lot of damage can occur as well, especially on riverbanks and things.
I suppose for me, you just got to take the emotion out of it. At the end of the day, it's a business decision. You have no choice.
Well, after it's happened quite a few
Yeah.
times too, you do gain experience, and you pretty well know if it's going to come up or not.
Yeah, that's right.
So you can look at it and take an educated or as best educated guess as you can, and say, no, I don't think I'm going to get it, or no, we've seen this before, and we got it last time, or
For us, for our personal farm, we're at Friends Reach in the Cornwallis there. Since we've had those big, Cornwallis is probably an exception to that, but say Friends Reach farm, since we had the big floods, we have the last 2 that we've had this year, they didn't get onto the farm, so we haven't had to make that decision again. Yeah. Last year 2 years ago, whatever it was, with Cornwallis, we had a section there where we harvested half the paddock of this, like half of one section, and top made the other part. But now as we're harvesting it, we're finding, like I said before, you got rolls that are good, rolls that are weaker and whatnot. So it's we haven't had to, me personally, haven't had to make that call again. Like the severity of what we first found in those,
Yeah, we just pretty much put a harvester in it, see what comes up, and then you just make the decision. Is it good? Is it bad? Do you just fertilise it, wait a few months? A few months could turn into a year, and then you know you made the wrong decision. So sometimes going in early and fixing the problem before it's a disaster works better.
Totally agree, and don't make any rash decisions like we did that early on. Like you just think, a good decision is any decision, which that's definitely not the case. Just stand back and have a bit of a good look at things, and then when conditions are right, obviously, just make sure it's safe to get out there in the first place. Yeah, give it a try. For starters, is a client going to be happy with this? So, if turf's 4 times heavier than it usually is it worth all that heartache to try to harvest a load and transport something 4 times, for the same amount of volume or meterage? That's what came into play for us. Like all the truck movements to move the same amounts of turf. Because it's got such excessive weight. So a lot of the times the perfect decision would be to replant or cultivate or strip off the turf and just start again and just leave little sections, or get on the phone to someone who's not so flood affected and try to just band together and
If it happens, you get a flood, close to winter or in winter, realistically, by the time the ground dries up enough for you to be able to cultivate, turn paddocks over, and by the time you plant, you're talking September before you're putting plant in the ground. So, and that's if things dry up and allows you to, because once you've got the silt in there, the silt just stays in there. You get this little bit of rain, you get a little bit of odd showers here and there. You can't even walk on the paddock, let alone put machines through it. So, and that's why, obviously the time of year and the weather does play a part in that decision making, because it just sits cold and dormant through the winter, and then it comes to September or before you can even realistically start planting again.
If it dries out fast enough. Problem is it stays wet.
It can work in your favour. Like you said, if you've got a fit paddock and it gets a lot of silt on it and it makes the grass really sick, it's not going to start growing realistically to the end of September, October. So if the ground dries up and you can get on it early in winter, re-prepare the ground, put fresh plant back in the ground, you're still going to have the crop ready by December or January, February, whatever variety it may be, but you're going to have a good product. You don't have to deal with waiting that 3, 4, 5 months and still knowing that you're not going to possibly get it off the ground.
I think it's the biggest thing, just the unknown. When you plough it in, you know what the results you're going to get. Probably you don't get another major flood the following year to destroy it, but when you plough it in, you almost know what you're going to get out of the product. When you try and salvage it, hit and miss, and you might get a good product and you might not. And you've waited 4 or 5 months for it to get there, and it might not harvest.
You also, you throw all sorts of money at it, spraying different chemicals and fertilisers, and so you're taking a hell of a lot of profit out of it anyway, just to try and salvage something that you don't even know if you're going to get it. That's what Jonathan was saying. Making rash decisions. It's all good and well to go and spray it with witch doctor powders and put all the expensive fertilisers on it. It can make it look great on top. It'll look beautiful. It still doesn't mean it's going to harvest.
100% right. I mean, if there's lots of work out there and you go, I've got the turf here, that can make you make the wrong decision to try and keep the turf and end up with a product like that when you really don't have any turf for the market. So sometimes if you just turned around and said, no, I'm gonna scrap this, I'm gonna start again, could be better off.
Pretty much a clean slate, and
sometimes. For us, for our instance, we had probably say two major paddocks of ours that we had to restart. We had to re-level. It was prior to the first floods. The levels weren't how we wanted them, and we needed the opportunity to get rid of the 30-acre block and reshape and do what we wanted to do. So we used that opportunity to do that, to improve the paddock for future floods and future-proof the paddock and just make the paddock better. So we had empty ground, but on the areas that were half ready or got that bit of sand over the top, we persisted with it. We brushed out as much as we could. We mowed out, and at the end of it, we were able to salvage part of the crop, but there were sections, on the edge or then a paddock, those sections that you just have to start again. So we would harvest what we could, then we'd rip out and cultivate and do whatever you have to on the ends to match it up, and hopefully years after that. So it's not all just hold in, because you've got 12 months before.
That's where your 2 or 3 years of inconsistent crops come.
From the first flood, it had been 30 years or 20, the best part of 30 years. No one had seen a flood on turf for a long, long, long time. And I think it goes back to rash decisions. You're best off staying off it. Don't rush into paddocks. When the first ones come along, they were still half wet, and we're out there trying to rake stuff up, and with like implements behind the tractor, and we did more damage than unlevel and putting ruts in paddocks, and it was just because we're farmers, we're workers, and you feel like you need to be out in the paddock doing something, but sometimes you just need to stop and sit back and wait till it dries up.
That's what my brother's like that.
Hey?
My brother's like that when it comes to fun. Said, don't even look at the paddock. So don't even look at it.
Best off not going to work for 2 weeks. Stay away from it.
A couple of weeks later, you go walk in the paddock. He said, get out of it. Stop looking at it. Let it dry up, and then we'll make a decision.
Like what Jonathan said, don't make any rash decisions. That's the worst thing you can do. Absolute worst thing you can do.
With sand, I found on cooches, they can tolerate a lot really heavy brooming, cooch and zoysia, up to brooming some areas up to 12 times, down to almost nothing. Broom out the thatch, let it come back. It harvested reasonably well. Shortening the roll length also does help, like in terms of weight and strength, and definitely letting things dry. So the drier the better for turf strength, so to get the oxygen and sunlight onto the crop.
Our place, we only grow kine cooch, so we can do that a lot more, and just taking a little bit off and getting it to a product where you might be able to harvest it later on, where you can build yourself some confidence with it. Also with the top maker, we've got a broom head for it, so where these guys spoke about brooming, you can broom with a top maker and actually pick that stuff up and take it off the paddock. So you're not actually getting into the layer completely like this. We've gave it a hard sweep and taken it straight off and away, and that's been pretty good for us. But in this instance here, that's been covered for a long time, and that's just too far gone, and that was just trying a few different things to get a bit of knowledge out there, but that's not leaving silt on there for a long time and hoping for the best doesn't work. We ended up with that section of land there that was heavily top maked, and just start again.
Shorten the roll length was a good solution. Unfortunately, it puts a lot of cost into the product. Where you're getting 50 metres on a pallet, you're down to like 32 or something. And then you just got more weight on the trucks, loading more weight. Then the layers, you got to lay per roll, so you're getting charged more per metre to lay. So it all just got carried to the end user, unfortunately. Luckily, market conditions were good at the time, and we still were able to do it. In different times when market conditions weren't as good, there wasn't an option because they could find turf other places.
But for us, same thing. We use the combination of the brooms just to take down that. So what happens? You get the silt that goes in between the thatch. So then, before you can harvest it, the grass has obviously got to green up. So when that happens, the roots and the leaves and the runners are all running on top of the thatch that's in the top part of it, above your root base. So when you go and put a harvester through it, the harvester has the roller that runs on the top of the grass normally. and it's got an inch or a couple of inches of silt in there, the blade is sitting up naturally higher. So you're cutting above your buffalo sort of root base where it normally holds together. So you've got to get the blade to go deeper to allow to cut below that sort of base. So anything found that we could reduce the silt level through the thatch of the grass, any of the turf that we salvaged, reduce that, pull that silt level out, whether it was the broom, the terra rake, mowing it out, different things, just to reduce the level of silt you had above your root mass, made for a better product at the end, like a better harvest at a better turf, a lighter product, and was able to salvage it. Sections at the end there where just falls a bit too much silt, we use the top maker to top make it out, get rid of all that thatch and get back to your dirt again, and in some sections replanted the edges of our paddocks or lower edge of the paddocks to match up to the half stuff that was harvested out.
Was that on buffalo?
That was on buffalo, yeah.
And when you top maked on buffalo, it came back through, it grew back? Or?
Grew back, but when we had harvested it, we weren't happy with it. So what we done last time, we top make the buffalo, and we actually strip sprayed it.
Right.
And because once it come back, because when you top make it, obviously it comes back really quick, but it had no tensile strength. So we actually put the strip spray through it to get some tensile strength back to it. Yeah. So what a strip sprayer is, it's made for, we normally use it in our couches and kais, but it pretty much sprays Roundup in rows and kills off part of the underground. Couches and kais have underground rhizomes and roots, and when they get too many, it weakens the strength of the tensile strength of the grass. So we go and kill part of it off to encourage the runners to run across more and make a tight and knit. Yeah, and that's what we found working in the buffalo.
It's like thinning out the crop pretty much to encourage horizontal.
Especially cooch, it gets root bound in the ground after a couple of harvests. After a couple of harvests, if you haven't strip sprayed it, you get more rhizomes in the ground. So when those plants, after you harvest and those plant regrows, it's too close, and you don't get those lateral long runners, that lock up. They just get individual plants everywhere with really short, stolons and runners, and the turf's half the strength. A quarter of the strength is what it would be as if it was strip sprayed.
Yeah, and on a buffalo, when you're top banking it, you can't go down to the dirt layer because you're taking away your material. You have to leave some of the buffalo in there because it doesn't have rhizomes. So you're leaving it, you're not going as deep, so you can't get back to your natural ground. So you're leaving that bit of turf there, so it comes back in 3 months, you've got green grass again, runs across, looks beautiful from the top, but same thing, because it's still got that silt in the root space of the grass, which just sort of rottens it out and just weakens the product. So you need that lateral growth to get some fibrous white roots back into the profile.
And the same thing with that. All right, you top make it, but then what are you going to do with all the material you top make it? Absolutely. So you're nearly better off ploughing it in anyway. It's just...
Yeah, where do you take all that? Like, that's all cost and time. Where do you take all those hectares?
Like you've got loads and loads of material you're taking off.
Just for me, the reason why I rathered the top maker was you could run over it, the bigger area, just push it up in the piles and get rid of it, and then your paddock was ready to go. It was hard.
Yeah.
If you ended up with another flood, the risk of erosion was far less.
Yeah. You just got to weigh up your options.
A lot of
I decided to do it that way. And, and with Cooch and Kai, the issue of top making isn't as intricate as buffalo. Like, if you go too deep with buffalo, you've done yourself a mischief.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't have much sand, more so silt. 3 paddocks down the bottom, we chopped them up, replanted, because they were just too heavy, and it was that heavy that it killed the cooch. And it's also low lying, so the water pretty well finished it off. But then, and the silt, and it just didn't grow back through the silt. So we just chopped 3 paddocks up. Some of the stuff up the top, closer to the road, we persisted. We heavily broomed it, and we were lucky, and we got away with it. Same thing, shortened rolls, heaps more transport costs and all that sort of thing. But we did end up getting a lot of it out, and some of it we just cut it and dumped it on the ground and pushed it up, and then started again and strip sprayed when it came home, when it came back. But you got to. The problem is, even though the first initial flood, we had a paddock of cooch, we had that rake there. We let it dry up, but you still got to get rid of it. We tried vacuuming it, you know, and the length of time and the work involved to get rid of it is quadruple just top making it. You know
When
what I
you're
mean?
working with those kinds of machines there, it's going to be bone dry.
Yeah, like
It's got to be bone dry.
It was dust storms, and we were raking, vacuuming, mowing, raking again, vacuuming. Extremely labour intensive, and you damage it with, you know, when you're doing it multiple times, you do quite substantial damage to the grass anyway. So you're setting the grass right back anyhow. So you know, it's a close call whether you just go from the start, just top make it, strip sprite, and that's it.
We use it a bit in the buffalo just to get a bit of air in the bit you've swept that you've reduced as much as you're possibly going to reduce, just to, you know, get that little bit of air and aeration in the top part of it, just to break it up that little bit. And you know, when it's dry, it sort of mows out a little bit. It's all just about taking that little bit more away, which becomes lighter at the end of it. That's what we found with it. But yeah, that's our only objective behind it, just to get it out of that last little bit of silt out of there without starting again, sort of thing.
If you get light, you know, if you just get a bit of light silt, you know, you can just lightly rake it, use a vacuum, mowing, vacuum it a few times. It does work, but it's not so much on the heavier parts where the silt drops.
And those machines aren't made for it too.
No.
So we're trying to incorporate
They're for
those
grass
machines to do something that aren't.
Use something against its initial
They're not
purpose.
built
I
for,
guess.
wears them out, and obviously, you know, a lot of the machines in there, some of them are worth quite a bit of money, and you can go and do a lot of trial and error, and you might save some grass, but then you get a hefty repair bill later on.
Probably 15 mil, like Jonathan. I think Joey or
I think it's
Jonathan
like
said before.
15, 20
About
mil,
15
yeah.
mil. Anything above that, you're going to struggle.
And that's provided it's silt, like it's muddy silt, so the composition of the soil can make a big difference. If it's like fluffy or powdery sand, just forget it, just start again.
Sand's very hard to pick up.
Very, very hard to mechanically
Very,
move.
very heavy.
And it moves where you don't want it, so when it's dry it's a nuisance as well, just blows around in the wind and poses other issues.
If you can walk on the paddock without it squelching under your feet or putting indents in the ground, if you can drive a tractor on the paddock without having wet wheels, you're probably half a chance. But don't even think about it before that.
Those hot days, real hot windy days, if you're getting in there and doing that kind of work there, raking and that, it sort of works with you a bit, I think.
Absolutely, that helps.
But yeah, you've got to worry about no hot windy days right now.
Time of year too, you know, winter, autumn, if, you know, as the days are short and everything's cold and wet, just say it's flooded last week, I wouldn't even bother trying for another 4 to 6 weeks after that, at least, yeah.
You got to remember you get heavy dew this time of year as well, you know.
Yeah, this all has a part to play. So.
Just doesn't dry out.
Yeah.
But in saying that, you know, I said hot windy weather and whatnot, you could go do a whole lot of raking, light top making and whatnot, and you could cause yourself problems with fungus, and that time of year brings its own issues. So yeah.
I think we're all familiar with even the finger test, you know, if it goes down more than the depth of your fingernail, you shouldn't really be doing anything on paddock with any sort of equipment as well.
Now, one of our paddocks we just persist with, let it dry up. Once it dried up, we started mowing it and trying to do what it do. We, as soon as it could dry up enough, we got the broom, the sweeper, swept some of the profile out, and then over the time it grew back in, we'll just sort of raking it up or mowing it out, sort of thing, trying to break up that little bit of crust there, and just hope for the best and want it. That's I guess that's all you can really do. If you are salvaging it, just try to sweep out as much as you can. That's paddock that was ready to harvest. That was a paddock that was harvesting prior to the flood, and conditions obviously were all right. But yeah, that's the only thing you can do. Just try to sweep what you can, clean up what you can, and then when you're harvesting, the rolls are going to be heavier. When it comes to harvest, whatever doesn't harvest, chuck away, get rid of, and clean up the paddock. So whether that's chucking bad rolls away and just get rid of them, just dumping them, or whether it was top making or hoeing ends of the paddocks in and replanting, the sooner you can get back to a more uniform crop, the better the paddock's going to be. So that's all we could do.
All right, so the one in question was pretty much a mixture of silt and sand. So it was like the layers of a cake. This was pretty much just get into the earth moving and mining equipment. So we were fortunate enough to have mining tippers on site. Calculated we had about 18,000 cubic metres of sand over probably a 5 hectare area, 4 hectares I think it was. Just scraping off down to original surface, because that's way too thick to work into this like the existing field. And broomed, laser leveled, replanted. So that was probably an 18-month exercise. And we were fortunate, as we discussed earlier, where do you take all that volume? We were fortunate enough we had a empty field next door that hadn't been planted yet, needed a lot of levelling, so all that spoil went into the low spots and then was covered over with the natural topsoil again. But hell of a lot of movements and earth moving. I could tell anyone, like, if it's more of a sandy sediment, definitely you'd do it again in a heartbeat. Don't try to work that into your topsoil, because we all work hard to have a nice healthy soil that we grow crop on, and when it's contaminated or off your own farm, you just don't know what it's got in it. Pathogens, weeds, all sorts of nasties and other random flood debris that we found along the way. So definitely stockpile it or scrape it off.
Depending how. And the first crop after, so from our situation where we did salvage it, that first crop after, we wouldn't have harvested 100% of it. We might have harvested 60 to 70% of the paddock. The rest of the paddock had to start again, ultimately. So we're able to salvage some parts of it, harvest what we can, and then fix up the rest around it. So it's not a pretty crop, that first crop afterwards, when you do salvage it.
Yeah, I suppose one of our paddocks, 2 weeks after the flood, surprisingly, we went in and we harvested. And it was like 2 metres underwater. But then another paddock 400 metres away, in the last 4 years, I've had it ready 3 times and I haven't harvested it once. Because it comes ready, flood, silt, start again. Comes ready, flood, silt, start again.
Yeah, so location and
Location,
if you're next to a riverbank or you've got a low-lying paddock, you pretty much know in your mind that that's going to be a write-off until drier times. So that could be, like Joe said, could be 3 months, could be 5 years.
Even just like in April, I was harvesting the paddock. I said, beautiful, I'm going to get it out this year. I cut about 3,000 metres. April flood came, went off quick. I said, it'll be okay. But as the water was going out, the sun cooked it. And now I'm probably going to lose 3 or 4 months just because of the time of year, because it's in winter. So I'm going to lose the whole winter now. So I'll probably be harvesting that September, October, hopefully, if we don't get another flood on it.
We've been the same. We've cut the following week. Soon, if we've got the highest paddock in the farm on the side of the hill there, once it was 2 metres, a couple of metres underwater. As soon as the water goes off it, because it hasn't got silt on it, it was up and down quick. When the water stays up over the grass, the longer it stays up, the more it flocculates down and settles that silt. If it stays up for a week, you're going to get a lot more silt. If you just get water come up over paddocks for 2 days, 3 days, you probably generally don't get too much silt, And as soon as it's dry enough to drive the harvester in there, it hasn't damaged the turf. You'll harvest it.
When you see that turf that that browny, blacky, sick colour. That's the, you know you're in for.
You can
you're
tell
in for
by the
hard
colour
times,
of the water, especially the recent one we've had down it's filled back in from the lagoon, from the river, filled the lagoon and washed up. I was down the bottom of the farm this morning and the turf is the colour of that stool there. It's just brown, just black, brown, nasty looking.
Not made to live underwater.
Half the paddock's still underwater, so it'll be a month before you even think about looking at it.
The riverbanks are scary because a couple of weeks after the flood goes away, you're dealing with erosion and slumping from the riverbanks. Like, you know, you've sort of almost not forgotten about the flood, but the flood's on the backburns because it's been 3 or 4 weeks, and all of a sudden a couple of acres of riverbank land just washes away in a heartbeat, as you can see in this footage. Like back where our shed was there, when that eroded, this must have been like a week, maybe 2 weeks after the flood. But with our farm there, where our corner shed was there, I think it must have been the first flood. I had my ute parked there. I got out, just walking around the riverbank, just checking it out and just seeing what's going on in the riverbank. And 40 minutes later, my brother rings me and he sends me a photo of the same spot and I was always mindful at the edge of the riverbank, always falls in that little bit. So I parked a fair bit away, what I thought a fair bit away from the edge of the river, the edge of the bank, and 40 minutes later, this big hole was all in the river. So if I was there 40 minutes later, my ute there, I'd have been at the bottom of the water. It just collapsed out of nowhere. And I'm not talking, right on the edge of the riverbank. I'm talking at least 10 metres away from the edge of the riverbank towards the road. Just one big hole, 9 metres in the ground, just washed away to nowhere. So yeah, riverbanks are just scary when they go.
More so even next door, Richie, in that their riverbank now is pretty much at the back of the shed. If you get another big flood, one of their sheds would nearly just about be in the river. So they've lost, there was probably 10 metres of land between that shed and the riverbank previously. That's all gone now, and the back corner of the shed's pretty much on the edge of the cliff.
Yeah, they're on that bit of a bend though.
Yeah.
Where it's
cuts.
coming down pretty straight and it's got to turn and it's just taking it away.
Riverbanks is obviously where your pumps usually are, so you lose your pump site. That's obviously the main thing the first priority is your pump site, because you can't start farming until you got water again. So you got to reinstate, or you got to salvage whatever you can of where your pump was. Like in the first 2 floods that we had, where our pump was no longer there. We had to then reinstate those areas, get our pumps back in operation. Forget the rest of the banks, but yeah, just to reinstate a safe track for the tractor to get down to put a pump in, put your foot valves and all that stuff back in, rebuild yourself back up, a foundation, so it doesn't hopefully get washed away the next couple of floods. But yeah, the pumps is the first priority that you're trying to get back in reinstated anyway.
Because you see it that often now, we're a bit complacent, you might think you've made a safe decision to just go and inspect things. You don't know how far what's the safe distance from the riverbank after the river water has receded, where it won't pose a risk to anyone or collapse under your feet. And the more this happens, the more unstable the bank is, and obviously then, it's damaged pump sites, but also where do you pump from now? Like, you could put the pump site where it originally was, but you don't know how shallow or deep the water is. So yeah, a lot of things come into play, and a lot of us use electric pumps. So if your infrastructure's damaged, sometimes like people have lost power that's provided there, power poles getting washed away, power lines. It gets very costly, and you obviously got to involve contractors as well to do that sort of stuff. So there's always time delay as well as huge costs outlaid to reinstate all this pretty much basic infrastructure. But yeah, it's...
I suppose the work permits too, to be able to, we've been lucky, I suppose, we've been able to get in straight away and reinstate pump sites, but to do it properly and put some good infrastructure there, the work permits aren't always, it's not always just go for it. I know in most rules about working on your riverbanks, you're not supposed to touch within 40 metres of your riverbank. But I know that from what I've been told, and that's on the Hawkesbury River, but 40 metres of the riverbank, you can't surely just say, I can't work over there and move back 40 metres and expect to put a new pump site there. And to do some major works, like some parts of ours are taking some pretty major work, a lot of rock, putting there, all natural product, but I don't know if it would pass these days or not. I don't know. If you don't fix it, we had to build a big wall out of a concrete block just to save one power pole. That was the last power pole, and if we didn't do that, I'm not sure where we'd end up.
You wouldn't like the amount of work that's had to go back into reinstating riverbanks and pump site prior to having these floods. There would be no way you would even consider doing this sort of works, because you wouldn't be allowed to do it, first of all, and you wouldn't touch the riverbanks. But obviously in events like this where it's all washed away, the problem is, for instance, the first flood, we lost all that land there, and that eroded right back until about probably 5-6 metres off Frimsbeach Road, so right at the corner road. They had to actually move the telegraph pole. The telegraph pole was just about to fall in, that supplied the main power to Upper Hawkesbury and that. So that pole had to be relocated to more solid ground because the wood had washed away. They then had to build a 9 metre rock wall that went down about 9 metre rock wall right against the road bed, and that was just to support Frimsbeach Road, protect Frimsbeach Road. Because the problem is, if you leave these riverbanks the way that, like when they first erode out, the next flood, that adds more velocity, adds more sort of current for the water to dig it out. So the next flood, when the water's coming down, that's just going to dig those banks and get more. So you might lose a little section this time. Next time it's bigger, 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 until you're interfering with roads and sheds and stuff like that. That's why you reinstate and you have to look after the riverbanks, is because if you don't, it's just going to have a knock-on effect and keep washing everything away naturally.
It has happened. It has carved it away a fair bit, but it's hard for people to go and spend. You can spend a lot of money on riverbanks, and it's hard because it's a bit of no man's land where you own it but you don't. You own it but it's not really yours, and to go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on your riverbank and you can't farm it, but if you don't, where do you end up? You could end up losing 50, 100 metres of land over time. So doing it right is doing it right from the start is probably the best way. No cheap fix there.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. We don't have a high bank and we're on the inside of a bend. So on my side of the river, I don't get cut, but opposite to us in Cornwallis, they cop it really bad. Yeah, and I see what's been going on to revive them riverbanks. I think from what I can see, it went beyond what local government could handle. And there was a few people doing the right thing, few people doing the wrong thing. And I think it probably wasn't managed 100% right. But I don't know, what can be done different, but...
and we all want to protect our asset and property, obviously, so that's hence, the importance of trying to stabilise riverbanks. And look, there's no right or wrong. A lot of people went into, quick repair, let's get it done mode, regardless of what authorities came and told them, don't do this, do that, what do you do here? But it just makes it very hard on any landowners and people down there when there's no one to, put their hand up and say, okay, this is what you can do and this is what you can't do, because there's too many grey areas and it's quite confusing and stressful on everyone involved too.
We're getting close to getting back to reinstating it to somewhat, but in that particular area, it was always been a real high bank, so very high up from the river. We've got on that corner, we've got a 200 odd and probably even older old barn. That's a historic barn that was on the property there. So when the first flood happened, we lost all that riverbank. We lost the support to that barn. So we lost the main support, fell down. We had to implement inside that shed. That sort of kept it up and kept everything. So our main priority at the time was we need to repair the riverbank to be able to protect that bit of history that's there. It's still currently standards, but it's been so long. We have to reinstate it. We had to get it back, and the only way you can do that with the amount of stuff that was lost was to bring in a certified fill back in there and compact it down. That's what we'll find works best, and then do it. So it's not so steep. Do it in your tiered or your batters, so you lessen that sort of the weight that has up above, and that way it future-proofs for the next, because it's going to flood again, for the next floods, and hopefully you don't wash away it doesn't collapse on you next time. And that's what we've been doing. We're getting close to the end of that stage of reinstating that area, and there'll be, I think by the time we finish, will be 3 or 4 tiers. That used to be one batter from the top down to the river. So we've stepped it out to 3 or 4 tiers now, and each of those tiers we step back about 2 or 3 metres, and then another tier go, and then that will just help stabilise everything, and protect that. The thing, if you leave it like that just washes away. It's just like a whirlpool, and it's just water to wash us through there, and that's just good. Unless you start and pack something, you've got to get solid base underneath. It's just going to keep happening because all that material there, it's real sandy, so sand just doesn't pack, just keeps collapsing.
Yeah, so at your nominal water level, what generally works is sandstone or natural boulders, quite large and like natural shape, and you just work it up higher than high tide, and then you work your batter from there, a gentle slope, and then revegetate that, and that tends to work well if you actually lay turf over it.
Yeah, what we found in the first flood, we used shale to reinstate our access tracks to our pump site. In the first flood, we used shale and then revegetated it. The next flood we come through, the shale just washed away because it didn't have enough binding to it, didn't pack down hard enough. So all that shale there, it just slumped away. Once the soil and stuff got wet underneath it, it just slumped away, and then we lost all the topsoils above that shale, just all went straight into the river. So the shale didn't have any sort of packing properties, it just didn't pack in there. When you're going with something that can pack, like a clay or something similar that can pack, and you use your rocks on your river edge, that helps, that gives us something stable so you can build up, gives you a foundation to build back from.
What we did when we first lost the pump site was, that's a picture of it there, we dug down below the water level and started using big boulders and pushed big boulders down to make a footing, and went far bigger than what the pump site needed to be, and kept coming up with lots of boulders and rip rock, and then as we got up, we just put a small layer of road base on there, so the whole thing is basically rock, and it hasn't moved since. On other parts of our riverbank work that was done many years before, when I was only young, was they battered back the riverbank, so sacrificed a portion of farmland, battered the riverbank back on a nice gentle slope, and grew certain varieties of trees on there, and they seem to have really done their job. And having the riverbank battered back, obviously when the water's flowing fast and going past it, there's no weight on top of that to collapse it in, and that's probably a 40-year-old project, and that's still as it was back then. So it's the only places where we don't have all those heavy tree numbers and batters is at our pump sites, but we've been able to fix we've got a really good plan on how to fix our next pump site, which is going to be exactly the same as that one, and you can overcome it, but having deep, sharp dropping riverbanks doesn't work where you've got massive flow of water. It just doesn't work. You've got to have batter or tier, definitely.
And obviously the higher the riverbank, the more cause for you have to go back even further to try and contain that 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 slope.
You don't want to just put you can't just put whatever you have to obviously you lose lots. So whatever you have to refill, you can't just put rubbish in there. You can't. You've got to have something that can. You can't just keep putting rubbish. You can't put rubbish on the riverbanks. You've got to reinstate it back. But you need, like Paul said, you need some foundation from whether that's in the rock or whatever it is. You need something solid underneath before you can build up on top. Like building anything, it's just you can't. Yeah, that first time where we used the shale at the time seemed fine, seemed compacted, but as soon as the next lot of water comes, it just didn't have no. It just shale just eventually just breaks up through what we use at the time, and yeah, everything we had done just washed away. So.
Well, we're lucky where we are because we're actually on a straight. We're not on a bend. You get a lot more washout if you're on a bend, on the outside of a bend. But where we are, we've lost a couple of willow trees into the river now, and the last two, even the small floods, the second last one we lost our pump site. So same thing as the boys, just big boulders, built a foundation and came up from that with some concrete blocks and road base on top. And but the proof's in the pudding. Even next door from the 22 flood, the 14 metre flood next door, we battered the riverbank back, probably about a 60 metre long section, and put couch grass on it, and it hasn't moved a millimetre since. Just a gradual batter, and it hasn't moved. It's perfect.
It's the first thing you go and check, and then when you hear that story there, that's probably not the first thing you should go and check. You should probably wait a couple of weeks before you go and check it.
You got to be so careful. And like for my instance there, where I parked, like I said, I was well away from the rivers. Even when I was walking there, I was probably looking over like this. I was probably a metre or something from the actual erosion edge. To think where my ute was parked 40 minutes later was in a big hole, you just would not comprehend. Like if you see the photos of where it was, like I'm talking, I don't know exact numbers, but it would have had to be at least 6 to 10 metres away from where the river is, where my ute was parked, right next to Freemsbeach Road, which is the main road where you on top of solid ground, sort of road base almost. There's no way you think it's going to go. And for it just to go in one big crater, like you dropped the bomb, is just unreal. And you got to be so careful, and the riverbanks are so dangerous because you can hear them just sort of slipping away. Yeah, that's really
Remember after that flood, and we come along Freemsbeach Road, and your pods, the irrigation pods, were they yours?
Yeah, I think they were. Yeah,
all over the road, and we helped you
Yeah.
put them on the riverside there. Like in hindsight, it was a bit dumb.
Yeah. Like you just don't. You just
don't know.
You just don't know. The riverbanks are so unpredictable. And in the first flood, I think what done the damage at the time, we had a lot of local rain. When we had the first real big flood.
So everything was soft.
Everything was soft. The ground had saturated, and that's what was happening. You're literally getting, when you look at the river, you're getting pockets of water just coming out. All your underground water from all the paddocks and all the rain had to get out somewhere. And on the riverbank, you've got sand material, so it finds that softer thing, and it's just pushing water holes in it. And that would happen weeks afterwards. And that just liquefies. And once you have too much weight above that, whether it's gravel, whether it's just too much dirt above, it just pops away. And that's what it was. It wasn't so much erosion, it was just the slumping and the slush just eventually getting out. The way we're reinstating them now, they seem to be holding up from what we've seen so far. But yeah, definitely, to build it back to what we had first time, 9 metres high, one straight sort of steep batter back to the river and just fill it back up with sand or topsoil. Next flood, it's going to do the exact same thing because there's no way you can stabilise that. And you have all these big willow trees and big trees along the river. They're all fine, but once they die off, and you've got one by itself, you have one that falls over, then that's what creates a more of a problem because that takes down with the root mass, takes a big chunk of dirt with it. So once that tree falls, takes a heap of dirt, then the water just comes in and just eats away. Whirlpool motion just stays eating away at it. Where if the trees that worked well, those smaller willows that aren't so top heavy, they were younger trees, and there was a cluster of them. They held those steep banks better because there's a cluster of root mass under there with the combination of the turf to help that held it. But where you got your big individual, gum trees or whatever big trees are lie on the riverbank, once they fall, they take everything with it, and that's where a lot of your damage starts. You get something like that, a big tree or something falling like that, and then everything just happens around it. We should be, and it is. Like, it's a lot of work. Well, back when, I was too young for it, but I know stories of mum and dad and that. They used to have like I don't even know what it's called, but the locals used to get around. They used to have like a group or whatever to reinstate riverbanks and plant plantings on the riverbanks, because at times they're having a lot of problems and thing. So I remember seeing photos of mum planting, tube stock plants.
It was the county council.
Was it? Yeah.
Hawkesbury River County Council.
Yeah.
Council,
Yeah. So all that work they done then, 30 years without a flood or anything like that, your riverbanks, you just leave them because you don't go there besides your pump and you maintain around it. But your best steep batters where all these plantings is, 30 years, everything you put there grows bigger, and it's ultimately unmaintained. You're just leaving it. So it was no surprise that we had so much damage come the first flood, because it's been so long without anybody doing any work to riverbanks. You didn't think of your riverbanks. It was just the riverbank was there, but you back when they were having floods, you're thinking about it. You're doing things to reinstate or doing things to protect the banks. When you have 30 years, you forget about what they are. And now we're at the stage where we've had floods, and riverbank restoration is something you think about now. So you do things to protect it for now. So
Everyone's, I think they're a bit more confused, or no one wants to own it, or even they don't have a list of basic, like I was saying earlier, do's or don'ts, what you can or can't do. And a lot of farmers here are proactive, and they know what works and what doesn't, with all the experience and all the years of
That's
seeing
what it
this.
comes back to.
Just
It comes
knowing
back to
the
local knowledge.
That's right, the local
And everyone
knowledge.
knows what happens at the back of their property.
That's right. So,
But that doesn't replicate for the whole river.
No,
you know.
exactly right.
This is what
Yeah.
we do there. It doesn't mean that we could do it across the river that's on a slight bend, because that's the exact opposite of the water only goes one way.
Absolutely.
It always flows out to sea, but what we do on our side isn't what someone can do on that side. So there is no rule that goes the whole way along. I think battering is the first and foremost. Everyone should batter their riverbanks and be allowed to batter their riverbanks, but obviously without regular maintenance, you end up with a hole in the riverbank like Cornwallis, which seems to be a problem that looks like it's impossible to fix.
the longer you leave it, the more impossible it's going to become.
That's the thing. So, yeah, there is a lot of rules out there of what you can and can't do, but if you're just allowed to do it, don't be silly about it. But if you're allowed to do it and make it stable, it could save a disaster like that. For what I see there, that's another problem waiting to happen. I can see it's already eroded down. That's another problem waiting to happen with those trees up on top and being so steep. But it's probably something, I think a lot of government money should be spent on riverbanks and waterways in the form of grant, because everyone knows what they have to do at the back. But you can't just get one contractor to come in and say, I'm going to do this all the way along, because it doesn't work. But a lot of money needs to be spent on riverbanks.
And doing nothing is just as negligent, because we're all relying on the water. There's fisheries down the river, and there's, big boating scene in our area. So a lot of ski boats, wake boats, all that sort of thing. So for their safety as well, in the summertime, they come on in. Riverbeds are always changing. What might have been once 8 metres deep might only be 0.8 metres deep. You don't know. The water hides a lot of things, and we want to protect that asset, have clean water and a safe waterway for everyone, really.
Well, it goes down to almost one lane there now, back up the stream a bit.
Yeah.
I don't know whereabouts it is, but you only got a little channel you can go through now. That
Back at Ebenezer.
you only got one little channel.
Only
Very
30 metres
dangerous.
wide,
So, yeah. And a lot of outsiders will drive in, and you hear of tourists drowning down on the river. There's a beach there. It's parts of the riverbed are probably like quicksand under that water. It's so dangerous. A waterway like that in the summer, want people to enjoy it as well.
Pull up at a nice beach and the riverbank collapses down on top of you.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a big safety issue. It is a big issue, very big issue.
yeah, a lot of time and effort, months and months in some circumstances, just to bolster. We had a few gaping holes in our riverbank. I lost count at about 100 truck and quad dogs of big boulders in one hole alone, just to try and stabilise it, because not 40 metres away are 2 sheds and 2 houses, so we don't want that sort of all washed down the river.
Probably like I mentioned before, it's like some paddocks that still haven't harvested that we want to see get going again, and we just need a good 12 months with no floods, which we haven't got. The other thing is some paddocks just aren't consistent because of all the trial and error with the silt, which we'll get through, but it's just part of it.
Yeah, we get a lot of weeds because we've got the lagoon down the bottom, so we've got all sorts of wild oats and Johnson grasses and all sorts of swamp style weeds that grow down there, and then they're all, depending on what time of year you get, it's all at, half of it's gone to seed, so it all just washes all over the paddocks, so there's a lot of mess to deal with after it, depending on the season.
Yeah, weeds and rock. The ongoing battle against weeds has been just, I've never seen anything like it, Probably prior to the major floods, I was probably only in turf maybe 10, 12 years, and these last 4 years, the weed problem's been massive. And the rocks, well, that's just something you just got to work with over time. It's just, I don't even know how you start to clean it up. I mean, obviously you can clean it up physically, go and pick them out, or rock pickers or whatnot, but they just seem to be everywhere and uncovering themselves everywhere.
How'd you get rock?
Phil dumped in the river, and just upstream and pushed it, a lot of it all over our place, and we're in sort of an area there where we're on the outside of a bend, and come straight through our shed infrastructure and whatnot, and just spewed rocks everywhere. Yeah,
it's a concern for all. It's an ongoing thing for us. Yeah, basically, and it's contamination too. It's the couch grass. There's a lot of natural couch down the bottom paddocks, cow paddocks. They're all full of natural couch and kikuyu. So you get kikuyu in couch paddocks and kikuyu in couch paddocks and couch in kai paddocks, and it gets to the point sometimes where you're spraying out huge patches, and it gets to the point it's that bad that you nearly got to chop it up sometimes because it just regrows. It comes in contact with the ground, and as soon as it shoots, it takes off.
Contamination is a big thing.
Contamination is
Contamination
and weeds is probably are the two
'Cause that just
longest
keeps-
lingering
they
things.
just, they just stay. Yeah, you'll spray that patch, and then next there'll be another patch there. And my brother had a paddock where spray it out, then you put the flags in the morning when you can see it with the dew, and you sort back, and there was more contaminate than what there was of the variety. So sprayed the whole paddock Roundup to start again. And that's after he had salvaged the crop. So he had got it back from flood. He had salvaged the crop. He was in the paddock ready to harvest, and it was sort of question mark how it was harvesting, but it was mediocre. Put the flags one morning, and after waiting 12 months of getting it back, he sprayed the whole lot with Roundup and started again because there's just too much contamination. So that's a pain.
Jason and Richie, they've chopped up probably 2 or 3 paddocks from contamination.
Yeah, well, Pat was harvesting, and then we put the flags out one morning. Next, he's got ready and sprayed the whole lot of Roundup, started again.
I suppose the only other big thing is the constant threat of the floods coming again.
Yeah, it's that psychological
Worry
thing.
Eminem.
Yeah, with what do you do, what don't you do
with
in the meantime.
no planning to mitigate it.
Well, every time you get anxious, every time they talk about getting 3 or 4 inches in Robertson or in the catchment, 3 days later what you're up for.
Yep, East Coast lows.
It's like, you've got a whole lot of things going on in life. You're trying to run your business, trying to run a farm, and then on top of that, it's like, oh, do we have to pack up again and pick everything up? And there's a lot to juggle.
It seems to be all right early in the week, but it seems to rain on a Friday night.
Yeah, it always seems to be jinxed on a weekend or a long weekend. And Sunday, that's the cursed day, really. we found.
Only floods at midnight, doesn't it?
Hey?
Only floods at midnight, doesn't it? It's the only time they're packing up.
Obviously, it might be a bit of madness, but it's also a passion. We just love what we do. You have to, because it's clearly not just for the financial gain. That's one big thing about it, of course. It's a living as well, but yeah, you just poke at it or get out. Keep going.
So it is. It is what it is.
It's a life choice.
You look at the upside too, where we're a floodplain, so you dig an excavator as deep as you want. You got luminous, beautiful soil, and we've got a river system with a good, secure water, supply. So it is what it is. We are farmers, and that's what we do. So we've got beautiful farmland. Yeah, trade-off. We do get these floods, and last few years we're getting a lot of rain, so floods are more prone. As much as it's hard to swallow, there's a lot of effort and there's a lot of money, then a lot of heartache that goes into it. But it is what it is, and that's just part of farming. For us, we've got another farm that's out of the flood, and back when it was before the flood broke, we'll worrying about where we're going to get our water from, and what's the water from. So at the end of the day, when you farm, it's one of those things. It's too wet, too cold, too hot, too dry. It is what it is. If you like farming, you get back out and you do it again, and you do it all again tomorrow. It's just part of life.
Friday morning I started moving the low stuff down the bottom, and it got to about lunchtime Friday, and I went, nah, we've got to take it all out. Because we get landlocked where we are, so we've got to make a call early. We can't let it come to 10.5 metres like other people can, We get the road can be blocked at 8, would have got to 8.6. The road can be blocked at say about 7.5 metres, so if it looks like getting anywhere near there, we need to get the whole kit and caboodle out to higher ground before we get stuck in there. You know what, sometimes you feel silly, like lunchtime Friday I thought, we thought, are we being overcautious here?
I think it's how you feel. You feel stupid.
We're going to look stupid moving the entire show, but I think you'd look more stupid getting caught in there. So you just go, you know what? If we've got to drive everything, spend a day to drive everything back in here and clean the sheds, so be it. I think it's much more safer way to think about it than being a bit complacent and waiting for it to get too close.
Once the flood comes, you don't have a second chance. Once the water's there's no going back to
too much
get
money.
stuff out. You're not driving machinery through water.
Too much money worth of equipment to be leaving it to the last minute and driving through flood water and all that sort of thing.
And you really got to know where your farm is located and what the river does, how it does flood, because like Trudy said, some people can leave it later because they don't get blocked in. We're a similar situation. Freeman's Beach, we're a little bit higher, but Cornwallis, that floods easy. So once Cornwallis goes under, it becomes an island. And then where we are on our farm, we've got the breakaway, we usually close first, and then we've got the butterfly farm that will close. So then we become another island where you can't get machinery, and then where we take it up to Grono Point, that's another area where a section of it floods. And the last flood that we're doing, the last load, with getting all the equipment out, the water's up to my headlights of my truck. That was the last load. We're driving through that section, through the water, the wheels up to your mudguards and things. So you really got to know, what time. And that last time it came up really, really quickly, that it didn't close Buttsworth Creek, but the Grono Point closed. There's a lot of water there, so it closed early. So that's a big juggling yak. And when you've got millions of dollars of machinery sitting there, that's what takes the time, and that's why you got to be prepared. That's why you just got to do those sometimes for nothing, that pain in the ass and packing up, because once it actually comes, sometimes you don't get enough warning, and
it's all too late.
Yeah, like the big flood, the 14-metre flood. I remember packing that flood and thinking, we'll contemplate, we don't have to pack up. We don't, between me, Dad, and Justin, we don't have to pack up. It's it's not going to be that high. It's not going to be that bad. And all of a sudden, looking out the office window and seeing a line of traffic on Freeman's Beach Road, and jump onto Facebook or realise that they'd shut North Richmond Bridge. Once they shut North Richmond Bridge, we're starting to get blocked in. So then this realistic reality hit in that we're running out of time. We don't have time. We've got to move. And at that stage, we'd half packed up. We hadn't pulled all the furniture out of the office. So then it was go, 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 and you don't stop for a breath. Once it's in, once you know that's happening, you're just moving. And those last few machines are going through a bit of water and moving to certain locations. So if this section gets blocked, I can still have access here. And then for our staff as well, getting them back home and getting them, a few of our staff and myself were on the other side of the river. So judging everything, having the farm evacuated, office evacuated, and then getting everybody home safely, it's a big juggling act depending where you are situated in the river system.
A metre an hour has always been known to be fast from what my father taught me. So having another 600 mil in the first hour on top of that, that would be crazy fast to stand on the riverbank and actually watch that. That would be scary.
And no local rain either.
Yeah, no local rain.
So that could have just been a catastrophe waiting to happen if we got even half or 3/4 of the amount of the rain they got in the southern highlands or on the south coast. So if that was more widespread, yeah, probably the town would have been teetering on the edge, I'd say.
We certainly dodged a bullet.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I think so.
I think
you got it instilled in you.
I think the management of the
levels
dam
of anxiety.
That's right.
The
It just needs to be
management's
mitigated, and
scary.
it can
If it's
be.
managed at the right time.
We're talking, 1.6 in an hour of no local rain.
That didn't have to be the case.
You won't want to comprehend what could have happened if we had the rains that we had when we got the first flood, and we had that sort of volume of water coming down the river system and local rain. I wouldn't like to know what we'd be dealing with. We definitely wouldn't be in this room talking a week later.
We know the Murrumbidgee and the Murray are different river systems, but along that catchment parts, people get weeks and months' notice. What about in the dry months or weeks? Why not release? And we'd all prefer an email or a text to just say, look, the river's going to be a metre or two higher than high tide for the next 2 weeks to avoid another 3 to 6 months of misery. That just gives us the certainty and the bit of security, and we can all rest assured that we don't have to pack up every second weekend like we do every time a bit of rain falls upstream. So
Mitigation's the scary. That's the scary part. The stuff we can do on the farm, what you can do on the farm, you've got not control over, but you have a little bit more control. You think when it comes to mitigation of the dam, you've got no control over. It's just, it is what it is. When it's open, and we're going to cop the brunt of that depending on what Mother Nature throws at you. So that's the scary part. That's the part you can't plan for, and that's why every flood is different. That's why every situation comes different.
We move out to Dad's place up on the hill, and because we've got 2 families living in the flood, so we all pack up there, and unfortunately, we just have to see it like a bit of a resting period, because we know we've got a lot of work coming. Yeah, so we just take it easy, and we know we're going to have to get stuck into it the next few weeks and months.
But to go with the mindset of
Yeah.
getting anxiety and poor me,
Yeah, you can't.
you do know that everyone else is in the same boat.
Yeah, that's right.
You're not alone in it. You can obviously see everyone around you's going to be feeling exactly what you're feeling. So, if you're having a tough time financially, mentally, physically, there's plenty of guys around that are probably feeling the same way. So you can't really, you're not going to sit there and bash your head up against the wall. It's not going to help anyone.
It's not something that you've done to cause it. It's just, it is what it is. And unfortunately, those times you can't. You got to think of the good times. You got to think what's at the end of the road. If you put the years, the months and years after, it's everything goes back into it. In terms of when we first got the flood, your motivation, it's a different sort of motivation. You sort of, the first couple of years, you motivate just to get by, just to get back to a normal, and it feels, you forget what the feeling was prior to having these floods of what motivates you at the time. It's just, it takes a lot out of you. It has to, but you've got to try to stay as positive as you can. We're a community. There's people around you. Like Paul said, you go talk to people, and You've got to keep your mental health strong, because you won't have enough strength to to get back out there, and you won't have enough inspiration to go back out and go do it again. Your mental health's a big part of it. That's a very important part that you've got to consider. And like, for instance, like for me and my brother, like Justin works with me, and Pat, he's got his own business, and when we first got the first flood, he just bought the farm. He was just starting up a new business, and I'm sure there's plenty of other people in a similar situation. But I know from our business, we're sort of a 30-odd year established sort of business. So you've got the backing of the established business. For somebody starting out new and starting in it, for 4 years, Pat didn't harvest, and I'm just saying because I know this story, and there's probably plenty of other people out there. 4 years he didn't harvest one bit of crop off his property, but just the mental thing, the amount of phone calls I had back and forth to Pat, and just being there as a bit of just a moral support and talking through it is very important, because you can very easily get overwhelmed and get too much for you. So you've got to have that support. You've got to have somebody you can just talk to, and you get emotional about it, but it's a very important part. Your mind's got to stay strong. You've got to stay focused.
I suppose what joins us together might be, with Jenny might join us with the people up the coast and down the coast who have been in the same boat, and, pardon the pun, but just people as far as Ballina, they're getting their farms washed away and having other issues, with being so close to the border of Queensland and Taree, Earl Sprayer ended up on the beach and whatnot. Like you're not alone, and it is a big network, I suppose. It is a big network of people that you can call on.
So it's that kind of unspoken elephant in the room when there's, when it's dams open, floods on. I know in my household, it's just like the unspoken elephant. There's something in your heart that how's this going to be, and what's going to end up happening. It's just you've got your family gets behind you and supports you because they know what you have to do. You have to go and pack up, and once it's down, you're back into it again. So it's just this sort of kind of silent support that your family has along. And for us, we've got staff and they've got families as well. So there's a lot of people that rely on the operations of what we do down in these riverlands. And
and your commitment to them.
You've got a big commitment.
Absolutely.
They've got families
You
as
want
well.
to keep the staff.
So that's for us. That's what gets you through, is the resilience of your staff, your team, and how everyone just, doesn't become a job anymore. Everyone just knows, all right, we've all got to put our work together, and let's just get stuck into it and get it done. So you've got to have that community around you, because you will go. You can go pretty crazy if you let yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely.
To a degree of the things that we can do that's in our power, we definitely do it, and we do it a hell of a lot better than we probably did 3-4 years ago. But yeah, it's just back to that frustration of things that can be done, and we all see and know what can be done at a higher level.
Yep.
And it's not.
We've got no control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've almost got a system in place of what goes first, what doesn't. Certain things bought some small infrastructure that just helps me pack up and whatnot. Build a bit of a refuge mound, so older machines go there. Just make it easier. That's about it. Stay at school.
Are you sure? Question mark, question mark.
Black with white writing. You can't stay in school.
If you're gonna do it, you've got to love your farming. None has always told us you do farming because you love farming, not for the money. And obviously, the money's the byproduct of what we do, and you make an income and you support all the families that we support, through staff and that. But you've got to love farming. You've got to have a passion for farming, and you've got to be passionate about it, because
It's a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah,
It's a good lifestyle, I believe. It's makes you tougher, makes you resilient. You be a bit more patient to unnecessary stuff out there. But you've got to love what you do, because when you go through times like this, we're talking about floods. On the flip side, the floods is drought, and that's the reality of once it stops raining, is you start dealing with drought. Before the floods broke, we were talking about water restrictions and how our industry was suffering because people couldn't water their lawns, and so that was. We were sitting in meetings similar to this, having that same conversation about Sydney Water, and now we're talking about flood mitigation and all this excess water. So good times and bad times, they will keep rolling through. So unless you love what you do, you've got a family that supports you, and the rest will work itself out. You just got to love what you do.
What you can't get done today, do tomorrow. Try again tomorrow. Persist. Yeah.